Hey guys, today we have a new game of cEDH for you. This game was really swinging as everyone had their ups and downs and shows the power of value engines and the need for early game creatures.
Alright, block there, kill that. Oh, that is trample. Guess I'm just dead on board.
I also really want to thank you guys as we just hit 100 subscribers and I'm so thrilled to keep making videos for you. Starting this game off is Fernando playing, you guessed it, Anowon. This competitive rogues deck relies on powerful cEDH cards and tribal synergies to outvalue his opponents. Next is Jimmy piloting Marath. This Naya control deck looks to use creature-based stacked cards along with Marath to slow down his opponents until he can assemble one of his own combos. Third up is Rick piloting Tynma Kraum. This deck is more commonly known as Opus Theif. This is a 4-color wheels deck that uses a variety of cards to gain advantage off wheeling while denying his opponents. And lastly is Steve. He brought out his pimped out Animar list. This creature-based combo deck looks to use Animar's cost reduction to outvalue his opponents. But before we get to the gameplay, I thought I would ask if you guys like these deck intros. Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below. And now, without further ado, let's get to the gameplay. Fernando plays a tapped Path to Ancestry and passes. Jimmy casts a Mana Crypt and bolts himself by cracking a Wooded Foothills for an untapped Stomping Ground. He casts a Birds of Paradise and passes after that. Rick plays a Volcanic Island, passing. Steve plays a Forest, casting a Kraum imprinting Trinket Mage to cast a Destiny Spinner. Fernando plays an Underground Sea and taps for a Fellwar Stone, passing after that. Jimmy wins the Crypt Trigger and plays a Homeward Path, tapping it to cast Smothering Tide. Rick, being a wheel deck himself, counters it with a Swan Song and Jimmy gets a 2/2 bird.
Damn, I was thinking you had a swan song.
I can't. Smothering Tide? Oh gosh.
He then casts an Arbor Elf and passes. Rick shocks himself for a Watery Grave and passes. Steve plays a Stomping Ground, shocking himself, and taps out to cast Animar. He attacks Rick for 2 and passes after that. Fernando at end step casts Chain of Vapor on Steve's Animar, and Steve does not copy it. Fernando plays Tainted Isle and casts a Mystic Remora, to which Rick responds with Counterspell. Fernando casts Theta Adele and scries off the Path of Ancestry, bottoming it and passes. Jimmy wins the Crypt Trigger and casts Granith Magistrate.
Super secret.
That is on the stack.
I wish that secret's take.
I don't know. It's just so good.
He follows it up with a Goblin Tinkerer. Moving to combat, he hits Fernando in the air for 2. Rick plays a Mana Conflux and takes 1 to cast Rhystic Study. Steve plays a Command Tower and taps out to cast Animar again from his hand and pays for the Rhystic. Fernando plays a Drowned Catacombs and moves straight to combat, attacking Rick for 2. He triggers Theta, who searches for his Sensei's Dividing Top and casts it, paying for the Rhystic. Fernando is done after that. Jimmy wins the Crypt Trigger again and casts Marath for 3, paying for the Rhystic, and goes to combat, hitting Rick in the air for 2, passing after that. Rick casts a Kicked Thieving Skydiver where X is 1, and Jimmy responds, worried that his crypt is at risk. He activates Marath twice, adding a counter to the Goblin Tinkerer and making a 1/1 Elemental. Rick targets his own top with Skydiver, and Fernando responds by tapping the top, drawing and putting it on top of Rick's library. Rick passes after that. Steve plays a Bloodstained Mire and passes turn. Fernando casts a Submerge for free on the Dreaded Magistrate at his end step. Fernando plays and cracks Scalding Tarn for an island, casting his commander, not paying for Rhystic. Fernando moves to combat and attacks Rick for 3 with Theta, now pumped with Anowon. Fernando takes Rick's Soul Ring and then resolves Anowon's Mill Trigger, but doesn't hit a creature. He casts Rick's Soul Ring and pays for the Rhystic. He then taps to cast a Cursed Totem.
Ooh.
Ooh.
To Jimmy's dismay. Rick misses the Rhystic trigger off this. Jimmy takes 3 from Crypt and casts a Crozen Grip, targeting Cursed Totem. He then casts a Growing Rite of Itlimoc and finds a Scavenging Ooze from the ETB. He moves to combat and attacks Steve in the air for 2, and at his end step, the Growing Rites flips into Itlimoc, Cradle of the Sun. And Rick is currently doing a great job at missing all these Rhystic triggers. Rick asks for power and toughness of each creature, and then casts a Variety Circle, and Steve mana drains it, paying for Rhystic and passing after that. Steve moves to his turn, adds 3 colors to his mana pool from the mana drain. What about that?
That expression is the same expression that you say on the intro from Dead on Board. Ah, that tramples.
Yeah.
That. I guess I'm dead on board.
Yeah.
He then casts a Hydroid Krasis where X is 4, paying for the Ristic. He draws 2, gains 2, and then proceeds to play a Strip Mine, stripping Jimmy's Cradle. Jimmy, feeling very sad, taps the Cradle for mana and activates Marath to take the final counter from it and put it on Goblin Tinkerer. Steve then attacks Rick for 2 and passes. Fernando plays a Murk Water Pathway and moves to combat, attacking Rick with Theta. He takes Rick's Mocked Diamond, leaving it exiled. Then Rick mills with Anowon, milling a Toxic Deluge,
Damn.
Oh wow, those hits, holy shit.
but no creature. Fernando then casts Demonic Tutor and pays for Ristic. He tutors for a card and then taps 6 for a Notorious Throng with Prowl cost. He gets 3 fairy tokens and an extra turn. He doesn't pay the Ristic though, and Rick draws. On Fernando's extra turn, he moves to combat and attacks Jimmy for 6 and Rick for 3. Jimmy mills 6 and hits a creature, and Fernando exiles Rick's Mana Vault. He then has Rick mill for 3 but no creature. Fernando only draws 1. Fernando then casts a Ristic of his own and pays for Rick's Ristic, then passes. Rick's Mana Vault remains exiled. Jimmy wins the Crypt Trigger and plays an Ancient Tomb as land and casts a Scavenging Ooze, and pays for Fernando's Ristic but not Rick's, and passes. Rick plays a Steam Vent untapped, taking 2, and casts a Dark Seal, paying for the Ristic, then passes. Steve casts a Forgotten Ancient, trigger the 2 Ristics. Steve cracks his fetch to grab a mountain and pays for both. Fernando responds to the cast with a Leadership Vacuum on Steve's Animar, and Jimmy responds by activating his Tinker and targeting Rick's Soul Ring owned by Fernando. Fernando draws off the vacuum, then the Ancient resolves. At Steve's end step, Rick casts a Brainstorm, triggering the Ancient, and for future, I won't be announcing the Ancient trigger. Steve passes after that. Fernando moves to combat and sends 3 fairies at Jimmy and a Theta at Rick. Theta grabs Rick's Cursed Totem. Jimmy blocks 1 fairy with his bird and mills 4, and Rick mills 3, both milling a creature, and Fernando draws 2 cards. Fernando then casts the Cursed Totem and pays for the Ristic. With the totem on the stack, Jimmy is forced to flash in a Hushwing Grip and pays for Fernando's Ristic. Fernando passes after that. Jimmy takes 3 off the crypt and plays a Bountiful Promenade. He then casts a Dranite Magistrate, paying for both Ristics, and attacks Fernando in the air for 2, passing after that. Rick plays a Sea of Clouds and casts a Rolling Earthquake where X is 3, not paying for the Ristic. And each creature and each player take 3. He passes after that. Steve does not move his Forgotten Ancient counters and attacks Fernando for 9. Then on his second main phase, casts a Sage of Anima and cracks Scalding Tarn to pay for Fernando's Ristic. Fernando casts a Limdul's Volt at end step, repeating the process 5 times and losing 5. Fernando plays a Morphic Pool and taps 6 for Una, and lets Rick draw from the Ristic. He passes. Jimmy loses his Crypt Trigger and plays a Forest. He casts Marath for 5, paying for both Ristics, and passes. Rick casts a Dockside Extortionist and pays for the Ristic, getting 5 triggers on the ETB. He plays a Verdant Catacombs as land, and then fetches up an Underground Seas. He then casts a Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, not paying for Fernando's Ristic. He +1s Jace and holds priority, casting a Demonic Consultation and triggering Ristic from Fernando. He lets Fernando draw, but Fernando, always having an answer, casts a Fierce Guardianship, targeting the Consultation. Rick draws from his Ristic and then responds with a Dovin's Veto of his own. Fernando responds by casting a Flusterstorm with a large storm count, pointing all the copies at Consultation. Consultation is countered, and Rick's attempt at winning is crushed by Fernando. Rick passes after that. Steve moves all his counters over to Krasis, and from all the spell singing, it's now a 1919 Flying Trample. He triggers his Sage, adding 3 creatures to his hands. He then casts a Morph creature for 3, and pays for Fernando's Ristic but not Rick's. He moves to combat and swings the 1919 at Fernando. Fernando blocks with Una, dropping to 4. Fernando Mystical Tutors at Steve's end step for his win condition, and the table, knowing he has the win, scoop it up. Closing notes. Anowon control is very strong with a suite of interaction or draw and tutors making it easy to assemble the Thassa consultation combo. MVP is Fernando, who always seemed to have an answer and generated so much card advantage from Ristic and Anowon and Thada. Rick did have a good chance to win, but Fernando had what he needed to stop him. Jimmy was shut down from the Curse Totem to his Gaia's getting stripped. He could not continue without any draw and limited mana fixing. Steve was set back a few times with his Animar getting bounced, so he could not get the value engine he needed going early. Steve also had a moment to take out Fernando, but had promised Fernando not to kill him on his final turn, not knowing Fernando had the win in hand. I hope you guys have enjoyed this gameplay. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing, as it really helps us keep making videos. And remember, never give up, even if you're dead on board. I'll see you guys later.